Elisa, a massive welcome to the Lead on Purpose podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, James. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Look, I think it's so important that you are here. And I know that the listener that's listening today knows that over the last few years, there's been a great degree of, I would say, uncertainty and maybe even chaos is the word. And what you specialize in is helping people to really embrace that chaos and learn how to turn that and essentially take that fire and turning it into fuel. So just to get started, what do you mean by become the fire?
Yeah, it is kind of a strange concept to think about, but the way that, as I went through my life and had so many challenges, as we all do, it's a very chaotic time in the world right now, as we know, but we all sort of face these challenges throughout our lifetimes, whether through childhood or, building a career or what have you. And so I started to think about that chaos as fire, like battling fires, and always thinking about, gosh, I'm being burned by the fire and it just feels so uncomfortably hot, right? And you just want to sort of get yourself out of the fire. And I started to think about how to change my mindset and think about the fire in a different way. Maybe the fire, fire can be destructive or fire can be constructive. You can sort of be forged through fire. So I started to think about how the fire could be helping me instead of harming me. So instead of thinking about always trying to get out of the fire, I started to think about myself becoming the fire and harnessing that strength and that, sort of empowerment of fire as fuel. So that's what becoming the fire means. It's really about stop thinking about this, gosh, I'm just being burned alive, and rather that you are the fire. So take it and own it almost.
I love it. And for the person listening right now going, okay, where would the fire show up in my life, or where is it? Is it friction? How would you describe that fire? What would people be looking out for when they're trying to find that fire?
I think the fire shows up in our lives in very unique and personal ways. So depending on, where you're from or what your experiences are, you might be dealing with racism or ageism or health battles, things like this that are, personal struggles, divorce, things like this that are just personally appearing as chaos or fires in your life. And so that's what I mean by it. So it's not really, something that's sort of, everyone can relate to it in their own individual way. And so instead of thinking about those experiences being fired, right? That's a fire in your life, thinking about it as being harmful, start to think about it as being, what can I learn from the experience? What can I take away? How can I do better now that I know that lesson? And that's kind of how I think about fire.
I love it. It's interesting. I asked a number of guests over the last few years. So some of them were running NBA teams, others were running Fortune 200 companies. And I just said, what is the consequence of poor leadership? Well, how would you sum up poor leadership? And about 60 to 70% of them all said this one word within a sentence on their response. And that one word was chaos. They said, if there's poor leadership, chaos ensues.
So, I'm not surprised.
And where have you seen that show up, whether with people you consult to or in your own life? Where have you seen the chaos show up, and how have you turned that into fuel?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, it started from the earliest days. So one of the stories I share in my book is about living in Beirut, Lebanon, when that country was sort of a powder keg before its civil war. I was very young. I describe a scene where I'm, on the sidewalk in front of our apartment building with my father, and, all of a sudden we, hear gunshots coming from the rooftops, and you see snipers on the building sort of shooting down below. And, so even as a child, that's scary, that's, dangerous, your sort of fight or flight, is going off, ringing all these alarm bells. And so being in that environment as a young child, I describe how that started to, instead of being a very scary, don't get me wrong, right? This is a very scary thing. It's a very, negative thing, but I started to think about how it gave me something. And what I took away from that experience, and many others like it, meaning, sort of, challenges and, bullies at school, another sort of, example of chaos early on. It gave me something called what I call situational awareness, which is just a very sort of, ability to read the room, take the temperature of the situation, understand what's going on around me, gives you this type of vision that allows you to not only navigate yourself to safety, but also to see opportunities, right? So by being aware of what's happening around you, you see problems. So I, saw problems and started thinking about how can I solve the problem? How can the problem not be a problem, but an opportunity? And so, again, growing up, the first sort of opportunity I saw was, my parents wouldn't buy me, these kind of expensive clothes that I wanted. So I figured out how to make the money myself, babysitting and, other sort of, early work that I could do to empower myself to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And that just was a kind of a game changer and started to form a pattern for me in my life of seeing problems and figuring out how to create solutions, make life better. I call it making life better. And that's sort of the mantra that I have lived by for a long time. Both in my personal life and in my professional life. My first business came about through a personal need to make life better. Second business came about through the exact same way, just, personal observations of my world and other people around me. And then sort of taking the temperature of the situation, making sure there was a business case for this idea, for this problem, and then creating the solution.
I love it. When I hear you speak, I think problems present possibilities. And not everyone thinks like that. Like, it's incredible that you do. A lot of people would say problems present anxiety, problems present defeat. But when I hear you, I think the possibilities are at the heart of who you are and what you do. Now, just to step back to Beirut for a second, it's interesting you bring that up. So I'm from Northern Ireland, grew up there, and we had we had similar challenges, different, but same concept of fighting religious divide and power, and there was a lot of bomb scares and whatnot. So it was an interesting childhood for sure. Now, going back to your experience of the snipers as a very young child, for some, that would have created turmoil, lifelong debilitating anxiety, PTSD. And for many, that's totally the case. Now, for you, that's not the case. It seems you've turned this into something really positive. So I look around us and we look for role models, whether that's on Instagram, whether that's on books that we're reading, but actually two of our greatest role models are key caregivers. So the people around us, whether it's our parents or our guardians, have such an influence on our mindset. So going back to Beirut, what was your recollection of your parents' response to all of this uncertainty with, all the chaos?
Yeah. That is such a keen observation. And I totally agree with you. And I will, without getting all, emotional, remembering in that moment, that I was there with my father who, and my two siblings. I have an older brother and a younger sister. And I just remember this, feeling of being completely, startled, and you don't know what to do when you're a kid. And he just grabbed our hands and yanked us, literally, not dragged us, but, guided us back to the apartment where we, then, sort of became a fight with my mother. He and my mother were fighting because she wanted to leave and he couldn't because he was there for, this big work thing. And it became extremely tense. But my dad's, leadership in that moment of, first of all, getting us out of harm's way, which obviously was key. And so knowing that my dad had my back, literally, and then, he was the one who sort of got us to safety by getting us out eventually from the country. So very dramatic story, actually, because my mother ended up leaving Beirut because her mother died. And so it was just a really crazy situation. And my dad really had to step up at a time when, he was dealing with his own stuff. He was an immigrant from the former Yugoslavia, where it was, leaving World War II. So again, like he was dealing with his own ghosts of, childhood trauma, leaving a war-torn place, being in another war-torn place, getting his kids out. I mean, crazy. So he was, a definite role model, strength under fire, resilience, and he has always been that way for me, ever since.
That's incredible. And I think it's such a special thing, almost full circle, for you to write this book and to help others who are walking through their own version of fire. And some people reading this book will be in war-torn areas, that may be in the Ukraine right now. There will be people sitting in New York reading this book who are having a really bad week at the office, and that's their version of fire. And it's really incredible that you've taken that experience as a child and then through other parts of your life and turned it into a pathway of hope. It's really incredible.
Thank you. I mean, when you get to a certain place, whoa, look what you got me all weepy here. But when you get to a certain place in your life, at least in my case, you want to share what you've gone through in the hopes that it makes a difference for other people. Because at the end of the day, that's all we really have. Like, who cares about all the success and accolades unless it makes a difference for other people? That's how I've always sort of lived my life. How can I make life better? And I've done that, through those businesses. But really the book, the way I think of it is, it's like the ultimate cup of coffee, right? People ask, can I sit down and, have a cup of coffee and we talk about it? And I'm like, I can tell you so much more and share so much more through these words that I struggled over, for years than I ever could at a cup of coffee or at a guest lecture or whatever. So this book, in my view, is the ultimate sort of form of mentorship that I can give. And I love to mentor people. I tell the story about how the book actually came to be because of this mentoring organization that I'm a part of, and somebody asking me a question after I told my story, how did you do it? And I was sort of blown away by the question, like, how did I do it? I don't know. I have to really think about it. And so that's how the book came to be.
And honestly, I would say writing the book and writing any book is so difficult, because to distill your life lessons into a book, it's so difficult because you have to take so much out to get to the core of the message, right?
Exactly. And it's there's a million stories in your life, but for me, choosing the ones that sort of made the point and were sort of those pivotal moments, like the Beirut story, or a few others in there that really sort of gave me those tough experiences I was talking about, those fires that I was able to transform into fuel. I mean, that's the how did you do it, really, in my view. It's not about, well, I went and I formed a C corporation, or you know what I mean? It's not that. It's the mindset that I was able to cultivate that enabled me to do it, much more so than the first you go, and set up your LLC. I mean, it's, what I mean? Anyone can tell you how to do that. So it's about taking the, as you said, that the problems and turning them into possibilities. That's the part that I was trying to get across, and I hope that I did.
Oh, I'm sure you'll get an amazing feedback from all of your readers throughout the world. And this mindset side of things, it's something that we all want to master. And I truly think when you learn to master your mindset, and to me that doesn't mean it's an end product, like we don't get to the point of absolute mastery. It's a never-ending journey, but when we learn to really work with it, it can transform our perception of the world. It can transform our relationships. What was the pivotal moment for you where you were like, "Ooh, I can go that route with my mindset, or I can go that route"? What was there a pivotal moment there?
Gosh, I mean, I'm not sure that there was one, because there's, the childhood moments, and I'm sure someone else, having been in that experience that I just described to you, could have gone in a different direction. And why did I go in the direction that I did? I don't know if I can answer that, right? Like, that one's a tough one, because I was so young. But then as I grew older and I described wanting these, kind of fancy clothes that I saw people wearing and that my parents were like, so I figured out how to solve that problem. I think it's really, for me, I guess there's a little piece of instinct in there too, right? It's these things can be taught, which is what I'm trying to do, but there is a bit of that sort of instinctive, well, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to let the world sort of knock me down, because I just have this inside of me that I want to do more. I want to become more. I just, I guess there was one time too that and now that I think of it, that I describe in the book that, visiting some of my cousins in Puerto Rico or in New York, who are my Puerto Rican side of the family, cousins, and just seeing, some things that really made me feel more driven. So sort of drug use and, people that I am personally related to, these are my, current cousins. And I just felt very much like I wanted to do more with my life. And so I think that was another really formative moment where, I could have gone in a certain direction. And I, thought about it very hard and was like, I'm going in the other direction. So that was probably a very key moment for me that was in early high school. So, 14 years old.
Yeah, it's such a choice, isn't it? That in terms of growth is really difficult, but also this path that seems easy, which, may end up being very difficult in the long run, is also, it's a hard choice. So choosing growth is not an easy pathway. But I'm glad that's the one you did choose.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. And it's a daily thing. I am who I am now, but I still find myself, you have a choice every day you get out of bed, right? I have some health challenges that I deal with. And so, and the other day, a giant, massive oak tree fell on our house.
Wow.
This is true, by the way. It just happened a few days ago. So chaos continues to happen. All of a sudden you hear this rumble crash on your house and you're like, what just happened? And it's, a giant 100-year-old oak tree on your roof. So anyway, you have a choice. How do you respond to that chaos, that fire? It's like, oh my God, you can go I just go crawl under the covers and hide from it. Or you can be like, well, let's get the tree off the house and keep going, So it never ends. And it's always a choice. And so that mindset has to be actively engaged.
Yeah, of course. And for the person listening right now going, hey, this is so uncertain. I have no idea what's happening this year. The news is forecasting this with the economy and this with the pandemic and this with the war. So for that person that's worrying, struggling, what's your advice to them around being able to be successful and to thrive this year in their own lives?
Yeah, I think this is a really crazy time, but it's also a time full of possibilities, because the pandemic in particular brought all of this sort of, problem, but opportunity. So we're all talking about the Great Resignation. We're talking about quiet quitting. We're talking about pivots, things like that. And I think that is awesome, because we've felt our mortality, which was horrifying and awful. At the same time, it's given us sort of this fresh perspective on life and savoring each day and living life with intention and living life, quite frankly, the way we want to live our lives, because we don't know about tomorrow. So harnessing that energy, that positive, sort of opportunity, if you will, to make a change, to start that business that you've always wanted to start, but you were just like, gosh, I don't want to take the risk. I'm a firm believer in taking that risk, a calculated risk. If, you're weighing the risk and the reward and, tipping over onto the side of being courageous and stepping into that moment of fear, but giving it a try and taking all of those hard-won lessons, and just saying, what, or starting it as a side hustle. That's another big thing that I advise people is if, you need that income, I totally understand, finding ways to at least get started and take a step forward. Because if you don't, you'll regret it and you'll never know. Maybe you have the next, idea, even if it's not the next big idea, it might be the next idea that brings you an extra couple thousand a month or whatever it is that you need. You never know what it could be unless you try. So, that's kind of my perspective on this crazy time that we're living in, is that yes, we have problems. Yes, we have challenges. Yes, we have sort of, these weird things that happen. but that also gives you opportunity. Look around, see the possibilities. What do you need in your life? What do your friends and family need? What does your boss need? And then start to find solutions and take steps towards, making something happen, manifesting what you want.
Great advice. And often when we're fearful, we just are debilitated. We don't know how to take the first step. So someone might be listening to this thinking, I want to learn to swim. I want to go for that first 1 kilometer run, or I want to apply for that CEO role that I've dreamt of my whole life. What's your advice to them to actually just take the first step so they're no longer debilitated? They're not sitting in indecision. They're actually going to step into their fear and step into the fire.
The first thing that comes to mind is, what have you got to lose? Why not? I always think about sort of the abundance mindset, and looking around you at, the fact that there's enough for everybody. So why not you? Why would you think, gosh, I'm not qualified, I don't have the experience, or, I'm not prepared. If you're training for something, like, why not you? Why not try? And sort of, if you need the preparation, start preparing however you need to, whether it's, running the 5K before you run the marathon, or, whatever it is. Start somewhere, because if that lack of inertia, just, it'll always be there unless you do something that gives it a little bit of a kickstart, a spark, as I like to call it in the book. Take that spark and run with it. But I really believe that a lot of us are struggling with that fear, that imposter syndrome, that they just aren't worthy, or can't quite figure out why I could be successful. But the point is that if I can do it, and I interviewed 10 other, leaders for the book, here's how they did it. You can certainly do it too. You don't need to be on the inside. You don't need to have any sort of, Ivy League education or anything like that. It's really about what's in here and what's up here, and then hitting go, hit go.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the idea of the spark and how important that spark is. So for people who've experienced racism, ageism, sexism, ableism, often those people have had their belief systems rewritten, and they have these new beliefs around how they fit into the world. And sometimes it can be really disempowering for them, really holds them back. How can they really become the fire and go, you know what? I'm not going to let other people tell me that I'm too old, too young, too this, too that. What's your advice for them to really embrace the fire and move forward and rewrite their belief systems?
Yeah, I love that question. My answer is, I feel like I have 2 or 3, but the first thing that comes to mind is that nobody on the planet has the same experience, perspective, lens through which they're viewing the world. So you already have something very special because it is unique to you. And so whether it's your age or the fact that you're an immigrant, or any of these experiences that are very difficult sometimes to overcome, it's given you that unique perspective, and your experiences in life, whether they're, like mine that I just described, or whether, there's something totally different, have given you sort of those lessons that are unique to you, that you can apply and then use to inform how you operate in the world. One thing I like to share is that, companies that have diverse teams, diverse boards, diverse points of view represented on their management teams are much more successful. That's just a fact. And so I feel like, rather than viewing your differences as a weakness, finding ways to think about them as your strengths, as your superpowers, and so that what makes you different also makes you powerful. And then as you think that way, your mindset changes. And then I feel like it changes the way you move through the world, because you're now thinking of your differences as your strengths rather than things that hold you back. So I talked to a number of leaders in the book who basically say they're looking for people who think differently than they do. They're looking for people with different perspectives because that helps inform their leadership. And then they take that into account before they make a decision and move forward. And so I would encourage anyone listening to think about that. And how does your unique perspective and experience as you have moved through the world help you and help others? How does it help the CEO that you want to, prove yourself to, so that you can get that promotion or what have you? That's how I would think about it. It's just, training yourself to, rewire your brain. Like every experience that you have, every sort of trait that you embody is something that can be a strength and not a weakness.
I love it. And you really embrace that uniqueness. And it's interesting you mentioned about a diverse board, a diverse leadership team, a diverse team in general. There's studies, and I've read this report, that they are more successful, and that even goes down to the financial metrics,
Yes.
that a more diverse organization ends up making more money. And we actually had a guest on who works in the DEI space a few months ago, who said exactly that, who actually stated the report, and we had a bit of feedback from an individual saying, I just don't believe it, and you don't need diversity in teams. Well, the report speaks for itself.
I am glad you brought that up, and I think there's more research being done into that, which is good, because we'll have more and more of this data to point to that just says this is a fact. The diversity equals success and financial success and company success, and so yes, I'm glad that you shared that, and I'm glad that your guests shared that as well, because the more we spread that message, the better.
100%. And when you were authoring the book, how did you meet that requirement for your own diversity when you were interviewing the leaders?
I guess I'm fortunate in that I have a pretty strong network that is already pretty diverse, because that's been important to me my whole life. So I tend to make these connections with very unique and diverse people because I'm interested in that. I'm attracted to that. I find that very valuable for my own life, surrounding myself. I talk about in the book about creating a personal board of directors too. And these are people not necessarily very formal in nature, but informally sort of, gathering people who have an interest in helping you, or being there for you, so that you can ping ideas back and forth, or, whether, formal coaching or just informal role modeling, mentoring, whatever you want to call it, or they'll connect you to somebody. I believe in that. And so these leaders that I shared in the book are, people that are in my own life or came about through one of those other connections. So that, you have to talk to so-and-so about that because, they're perfect. So that's how that came together. And I just was really cognizant about wanting to have a nice, diverse array of voices represented in the book.
I love it. It's so important. And what's the cost, the true cost, if somebody doesn't become the fire and the fire ends up consuming them in a negative way? What are the costs associated with that?
It's, first of all, I get the kind of the sad face, it's just a loss, right, for that person in their own life, so that they go through life thinking that they're being burned and gosh, nothing else. Now this happened. And so life is just, against me. And, it's just, they feel beaten down, and I get it. Like I said, there's days when I wake up and I feel beaten down, right? Because it's just a lot. So the cost to that person is, the opportunity cost, because they're just stuck in that place of, maybe it's the scarcity mindset, which is the opposite of what I was talking about with the abundance mindset. And it's just, there's not enough out there. It's just, it's not going to happen for me. All of these sort of negative thoughts that can happen when life takes a beat, beats you down, which is understandable. So you have to be very careful, I think, to keep the mindset in check and to keep feeding yourself positively. And I talk about in the book what I do personally to sort of nourish myself so that I can keep that well full, because it's very easy to have just run out empty. So the opportunity cost for the individual, and then that translates into a loss for society, because then all of a sudden someone who might have been an extremely valuable player on a team, at a company, at an organization of whatever kind, or helping other individuals, we've lost that. So the way that I like to sort of, I guess, define leadership, or, how do we create more positive leaders? I like to say that leadership is the ability to motivate oneself and others to make the world a better place. And so without what I was just talking about, we've lost that in that particular individual, and then the ripple effect of what that person could have done to make their own life better first and foremost, and then spread that out into the world to make other people's lives better.
Yeah, it's a monumental potential impact if it's not acted upon. I love that. And you talked about some of those rituals, routines that you have for yourself. What are some of those things that you really engage in?
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's been sort of years in the making, where I think of my ability to lead. And what I mean by leading, I mean myself and other people, because it starts right here. If I can't motivate myself and lead myself, I'm not going to be successful at leading anybody else. So it's a practice that sort of involves some spirituality, some mindfulness, and some, physical activities that keep me inspired. I like to say I'm inspired, and then I can inspire and be inspired. So it's a give and take with the world, in order to inspire, I need to be inspired. And so it's kind of like going back and forth all the time. So with that said, I think mindfulness is probably, I have to put that at the top of the list. Mindfulness to me is my ability to give myself white space. I call it white space, throughout the day, by taking little moments. It's not a lot of time because, super busy, right? But then you have to catch yourself and just be like, before I get to that feeling of, burnout or exhaustion or whatever, I'm going to do X. And so what is X? It can involve meditation for a few minutes. It can involve taking a walk. It can involve, here's something that I've become really, really excited about, which is going to sound like ho-hum, gardening.
Love it.
Gardening, and that can mean actually going outside and, digging in the dirt, or it can mean just spritzing my lemon tree plants that I have in pots in my house, Oh, and I've now grown 2 or 3 avocado plants from the avocado seed, totally random, small little things that bring me joy and that make me feel like I'm growing something. And it's almost, I don't know. It's like a little bit of an example of what I'm doing in my bigger life. The gardening is gosh, it started from a seed, and now it's a plant, and now it's 3 feet, and now it's 4 feet. And I'm like, holy cow, I'm growing a lemon tree. It's like, wow. And so the joy that I get, it just translates. And giving myself that break in the day to spritz my little lemon tree, it just, all of a sudden I've stopped thinking about the next phone call or the next article or whatever. And I'm just spritzing the darn lemon tree.
I love it.
And so, yeah, those are the types of things, or taking a walk, or, yoga, taking a bike ride, anything that sort of lets you separate yourself from the grind, just even for a few minutes, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I love that you do that. It's interesting. A lot of my clients who want to embrace more joy and fulfillment, I just ask them to create a joy menu of things they love, because often when we're feeling overwhelmed, it's hard to think, well, what do I want to do? So for you, it's let's go into the garden. But having that on a menu when you feel stressed, looking at the menu, like, okay, I'll do the yoga, I'll do the gardening.
Yes, and journaling. I should say journaling has been really huge, and I don't want it to sound like it has to be something really elaborate or, whatever. And I know some people are really fond of the pen and paper, but even if you're just even, flying by and you have this thought that you want to capture, do it on your phone, like anywhere you are, just to jot down some random thoughts. I've gotten so many good ideas, like when I'm in the garden, and I'm like, oh, this is a great idea for blah, blah, blah. And then I don't have my pen and paper, but I have my phone. So I'll jot down a couple of sentences on my phone. And then later I'm like, oh, wow, I'm glad I did that, because I would have forgotten, had I not jotted it down, and it's, translated into, something else that I've done for the business or whatever. So I think, writing is a really big deal. So getting things on paper.
Oh, I agree. And there's such a movement towards journaling, whether that's gratitude journaling, future self journaling, but I see so much power in it. It's something I've done for many years myself. And I really enjoy the experience of doing it. Yeah.
Good. Well, see, it works.
Now, I want to chat a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, and about how you feel and how you've experienced and seen it for women who seek success. What is it that they face? What are their challenges? How do they overcome it?
This is such an important topic. There was a study, there's tons of studies on this, but in my book by McKinsey and Company, that this is now, I think, sixth year that they've done this study on women in the workplace. And they partnered with the Lean organization on this, and they continue to find year after year that there is a broken rung for women in the workplace. And what that means is that women can't climb that ladder at the same pace level as their male or white counterparts. So this is for women and for BIPOC, as I call it in my book, which is just, it's a very sad thing for me, because we're aware that this problem exists for women of color and people of color, and yet there's just not enough being done, even though more awareness is helping. But there's a broken rung, and so women are kind of basically stopped from advancing into the C-suite. There's also the same problem if you're an entrepreneur, as I am, where we have a harder time raising capital that might more easily go to, men. And so I talk about these challenges that I experienced, throughout my book, so that people know kind of what I went through and how I chose to focus on it, and taking the view, focusing on what I can do instead of what I can't. And so when some doors close, I just kind of opened other doors. And I know that sounds cliche, but that's exactly what I did. So I feel like, again, we talked a little bit earlier in our conversation about, how women can overcome that broken rung, and how they can use their differences as strengths, and how they can, bring that unique perspective and, sort of leverage them as their superpowers, and, sort of use that as their, I don't want to say how to say it. It's not really an opportunity, but it's not an advantage either. It's more like, seeing it as your strength, and then going forward with that instead of, letting it hold you back. So it's really more of a mindset than anything. And continuing to look for companies that are aware of this problem and actively looking to solve it, looking for leaders who are talking, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and actually making changes in their organizations to address this problem. And there are many of them that are doing that. That's the good news. So I think that if you are a woman and you are looking, you're not finding that in your current workplace, my advice is to look around and look for companies that you see that are walking the walk in this space, and leaders of those companies, and start to follow and engage. LinkedIn is a great place for that. I'm finding, it's a great place to engage. And many times those leaders will engage back. It's really very cool. There's a lot of negatives to social media, but there's really some positives. And that's one of them, in my view, is that you actually have a little bit of access, if you are strategic and use it in the right way, to connect with people that have like-minded, sort of views in that area. So I would encourage, opening up your worldview to, other companies, if your company is not recognizing your skills and talents in that area, and looking for other opportunities like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really feel that positive action trumps positive thinking, and we talk a lot about positive thinking and building awareness. That's definitely the starting point, but we need action, and we need things to change, and that change happens through action. And a lot of this is top down. So the people sitting at the top have got to make changes. So if there's someone listening right now who leads a team, leads an organization, maybe even leads a country, what's your advice to them around, hey, this is what positive action looks like. This is how we make a difference for our young girls that are stepping into the workforce. And this is how we make a difference for our current female workforce.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And if I had the right answer, I think, the world would change, but what I would hope is that as we get more leaders in the positions of, power, the power to make changes happen, that they will see the value in all of the diversity that you and I have been describing, of age, of race, of religion, of, immigration, all these different things that make people feel that they're on the outside rather than the inside. And start to broaden your lens, leaders, in terms of who you think about for key positions. And yes, look for skills, like hard skills that people have, but also look for soft skills that are, I think, equally important. I talk a lot about empathy in the book, because I believe that empathy is probably the number one leadership skill that we need today. And what I mean by that is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what they're going through, so that then you can empower them to be their best self within these sort of constraints that they may have, whether it's, my child is sick, or I'm going through a divorce, or, whatever it is that is their fire that they're going through in their life at the time. And if you can put yourself in their shoes and say, it's okay if you're late, or you take that day off, or, trying to enable people to, be their best selves, give their best work product in sort of the environment that you can meet them where they're at. I think those types of actions by people in leadership will pay off hugely, because those employees, those team members are then, oh my gosh, I can't believe my boss just, said that. Like, I can be an hour late without feeling like I'm, going to get fired, or I can do, what I mean? Then they want to, go through walls for you. Then they want to work harder. They will, I don't want to say this is a good thing, but they'll work till midnight if they don't, they don't start working till 1, in the afternoon or whatever. I mean, there's trade-offs, and I've kind of operated my businesses like that, because I do empathize. I want the best for my employees, and ultimately, when I give my employees what's, sort of best for them in their life, they're going to give me their best, which then results in more success for the business.
100%. Absolutely amazing insights. And look, I've got a couple of last questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And one of those is, in the background, for the person listening and can't see video, there's a big sign in the background that says 30 seconds. So please tell me more about that.
Thank you. Well, 30 seconds is this second business, 30seconds.com. And what it is a digital lifestyle media platform that makes life better in 30 seconds. And we do that by delivering great content that mostly is about health, food, parenting, sort of lifestyle topics that are important to you in your life. And especially, we noticed a very interesting trend during the pandemic with people, leaning in towards health and food topics in particular. We're spending more time at home. We're, making more things are, DIY, things like that. So that's what 30 seconds is all about. We do it, in a short amount of time. Hopefully we deliver on that brand promise and, sort of giving that great, quick information. And that came from a need in my personal life back in, was when I was working. So can I give you a little bit of background?
Of course.
Maybe? Okay. So the first business I started was called iParenting.com. And that was from a need in my personal life. I was expecting my first child and wanting information about pregnancy. And so not finding what I was looking for, I created my own. And that, evolved into a very large parenting organization or website that was acquired by the Walt Disney Company. So then I'm working at Disney, and the next thing that's happening is the evolution of mobile. And I'm seeing, we're all addicted to these mobile devices, and this is the next sort of opportunity and challenge problem, if you will, that I need to solve for, which is how do we deliver great information quickly, while so many other distractions are happening on these phones. So then I developed the 30 seconds concept. So that's what 30 seconds is all about. And, as I mentioned before, kind of, seeing the problem, delivering solutions, and making life better is just kind of what that's all about.
I love it. Like, I just see you as you've stepped through your life as saying, okay, I see a problem. Okay, I'm gonna find a solution, but I'm also going to bring people along for the ride. This is going to be fun. I'm going to empower others. And I see Become the Fire as the next evolution of that journey for you. It's just incredible what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate it, especially coming from you. So thank you. I feel very blessed, very grateful that, I've been able to, sort of come through all of this fire and then now put it all into a book that I hope makes a difference and, answers the question, how did you do it? So that then other people can also do it. That's what this is all about for me.
Well, I knew it was the real deal because I have a lot of time and respect for your publisher, New World Library. And when they reached out to say, James, you've got to have Elisa on the show, I read the book and I was like, yep, 100% you're right. So I'm delighted that we could create this space. And I've got one last question.
Yes, thank you.
If we were to fast forward to the end of life, so many, many years into the future, and you know that it's your last day, and someone very young, very special, maybe 6, 7 years old, comes up to you and asks you, how do I lead my life on purpose? What advice would you have for them?
Wow, what an awesome question. I think you're just trying to make me cry, because that's like, you would hope that by that age, you'd have so much wisdom that you could deliver, a impactful message that would resonate. How can I live my life on purpose? I think you wake up every day and you intentionally decide that it's going to be a great day. And I'm going to look around and I'm going to see the problems as opportunities. I'm going to figure out how to solve problems for myself and for other people. I'm going to create community, because to your point, what's the point if you're not doing it with others and for others? And you're going to find ways to touch people and make their lives better, because when you do that, you make your own life better. And so that's what it's always been about for me. It's like solving this problem, not only for myself, but for others. And so, and that creates those ripple effects that change the world. So I hope that, a young person would hear those words and then say, I can do that. I can wake up every day and, think of my problems as possibilities, and then how to figure out how to solve them, not only for myself, but for other people. That's what I would say.
Elisa, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that there'll be a listener right now that will go, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And for that listener that's inspired and wants to become the fire, please check out the link in the show notes where you can go and order your copy right now and get reading. And Elisa, thank you so much for the work that you do. I look forward to reconnecting with you again in the future. Thank you. I do too. Thank you so much for having me, James. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed the content today, please smash that subscribe button below. And if you want to become part of my community, I've got an amazing free Facebook group. Please come and join us. The link is in the description below. And also, if you've got any questions about today's session, I'd love to know. Just comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you guys. Have the most amazing day.